Okay, stop it. It's easier for me to do one. I'm gonna actually leave that in as a little
take.
Cynthia's progressed in her clapping skills.
Yeah.
Welcome to Flying for Flavor.
Cheers.
Cheers.
With my
Oh my gosh.
espresso martini for our marathon we're gonna record today.
Okay, just. Oh my God, she's got a drinking problem.
It's
Okay.
a good day.
So, because we have some crazy schedules coming up with me traveling, etc., we're actually taping a couple of episodes today. So normally we don't drink as much. We are going to be here for a while.
This shirt's gonna last 3 hours.
Oh my Lord. Okay,
so serious.
So we're going to be tackling a few episodes, and she was going to bring like changes of clothes and stuff, and I didn't think she was going to, so I didn't.
You always have like wardrobe changes.
I was going to, and then I thought we're going to be in the same restaurant, so it seems kind of. I just thought we were going to be in the same restaurant, so it would be kind of obvious.
It's all right. The more drinks I have, the more layers will come off. Anyway,
So speaking of restaurants, we are here at Oscar's Grill, downtown Sudbury, just for some snacks and some wine. Hello.
It is so pretty here. I love this space.
I do love this
space. I want
space.
to do something here.
And we're sitting actually right in front of the windows, so you can't see it if you're watching the video, but it's just a wall of windows.
You know what? I'm going to take a picture. And then we can like
take
post
a picture?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The behind the scenes, you're going to get to see.
behind the scenes. So if you're in the VIP group,
you'll get to see that.
You'll get to see it. Here we go. Here's our view. Oh, I should panorama it. Open out those people. We don't know them.
It's fairly early and light out, and with all the windows, we don't have to worry about bringing the light boxes and everything else, which is good.
There you are.
Hey. So okay. There's so one of the reasons I wanted to do this is mostly because every time I do a wine class or just start drinking with friends, I have these set rules that I have for what wine I'm going to have when, and everyone thinks I'm ridiculous for it, but there's reasons behind my madness. Partly has to do with because I probably drink and taste wines and things more often than other people do, I need to make sure I have my faculties by the end of the night. So I'll go through the why behind it afterwards. But essentially, when I said drinking with the sun, it basically just means as the light in the sky changes, that is essentially the color of what I'm drinking kind of matches that. Somebody in Europe told me that that's how they do it, or a lot of Europeans do that as well. They may all have their different reasons, but it was just an easy way for me to remember.
It takes a professional alcoholic to have rules and know exactly how to drink the most, get the most bang for your buck. Right?
You know, you gotta do what you gotta do. High five. Okay. So,
love it.
Before we get started though, I wanted to give a quick update. We had posted on the Facebook page earlier today. Today is Wednesday. So today you'll probably see, especially if you're in North America, you just noticed that both the American and Canadian governments just updated and grounded all the Boeing 737 MAX 8s and 9s. I had posted it first thing in the morning prior to either of those governments doing it because all of the others had, which meant that hopefully, I was hoping by this morning that everybody else was going to follow suit. But there's a lot of people that don't realize that when you book a trip or a flight anywhere, especially if you're just even going into all-inclusive, your flight details include what kind of plane you're going to be on. So the first thing I did when I heard that they were starting to ground them is I actually pulled up the flight confirmation for my flight for about a week from now, and I just scrolled through and it actually listed, all of the planes that we were going to be on. So I thought it was important to remind people that you don't always know, depending on who you've booked with, about how serious it can actually be if there's actually a flight thing, because as much as you just assume that someone else is looking out for you.
They'll switch planes on you as well. So it's one of those things that's like, I think I'm going to be on this plane, and then you get there like, oh, well, that plane had a malfunction, so we're going to bring this plane in. Did I ever tell you about the very first time, before the very first time I ever flew? I was 20, maybe. I'd flown as a child, but I didn't really remember it. So this is the first time we flew as a family to go. So we went to Florida, to Disney World when I was 19. My boyfriend was coming with me, and my parents, and my brother. And I was working at a local bar, Ralph's.
Oh my God.
Shooter girl back in the day.
Okay, all celebrity people. Remember Ralph's?
Ralph's. It was only a couple years ago. And I worked 2 quiet nights and 2 busy nights. So this was one of our quiet nights, and so I basically sat with the bartender, we watched TV and served a few drinks. It was this whole special on plane crashes.
Oh, nice.
Which is the best thing for someone with anxiety disorder to watch before they go on their first plane ride ever. But boy, did I ever notice the types of planes when they started going through it. So going through 737, 747, 757. And I remember checking, one of them was the worst one, and I don't remember which one it is. It was also 5 years ago. And I tell you, I went home that day and I checked which plane we were flying on, and it was the safest one of all the ones they described. So least likely of hopefully crashing.
So because I was watching that and I was making notes and sharing it, and I know, and I also get teased a lot about my addiction to news and information. I'm a bit of
tease yourself more than everyone else does.
I do. I'm a bit of a nerd. I mean,
it's
one of those things that sometimes I always like surprise myself, like, wow, how did I know that? But I like to learn about things. So I thought there was a lot of research and stuff that I do, or I think is important prior to going to a different country. And I thought it kind of deserved the research part of it deserved its own episode. So that's going to be next week. But I just wanted to give you an update on the Boeing issue, and then I'll go into more depth about exactly what it was, what the updates are. Hopefully, there'll be a little bit more detail and stuff for those who are actually looking into it, or they were hearing about all the scary things, just sort of calm your nerves about what it actually was and what it meant and what the actual fixes are going to be. From what we're known publicly, right? Okay. All right. That was a boring start. Let's talk about the fun stuff now.
Okay.
It's time.
Industry updates. Okay.
We got to find a better word for than industry updates. Yeah.
Okay. Cynthia's corner. No. Okay. Industry update. So this one's kind of related to last week we did traveling with kids. Mm-hmm. So it never occurred to me when we were doing the show that I had this really lovely girlfriend who I met when we were in Australia, who moved to the States about a year before we moved back to Canada. And we had connected, and she lived down the street from us. Our girls went to school together. Just a really, really lovely lady named Fiona Kerr. And Fiona and her husband Brock, when they moved to the U.S., the purpose was to expose their children to kind of new experiences, and his work had given him this opportunity. And at one point I remember watching, because we're Facebook friends and we stay in touch here and there through Facebook, and they are everywhere. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, so where this came from is I had an article that came across, her husband shared, of her being mentioned in the Berkshire Edge, which is an online newspaper kind of thing. So she's originally from Wagga Wagga, Australia. How much do I love that it's called Wagga Wagga?
That's very cool.
By the way. But she and her husband Brock have traveled all over the world 17 years with their kids. They've been traversing the world. They're based out of the States now. They've taken their kids everywhere from Alaska to Africa, and we're talking for months at a time, like, anywhere from 3 weeks to a few months, and, pull them out of school. But I mean, of course, Fiona being the very bright, amazing lady that she is, everywhere she goes becomes an educational experience. So if they're traveling in Europe, the kids get, €3 a day, and it's like, this is your money you have to spend. So the kids are learning math throughout the day as they're figuring out how much they're going to spend and how much they're going to keep. They're learning different languages, because everywhere they're going, they've got new languages, so it's helping to improve their English skills, but also exposing them to different languages. So it's a really great article that I couldn't post on social media, but we'll include it in the show notes. If you want to learn more about how Fiona and Brock have managed to travel, so they've got 3 children. They range in ages. I want to say the youngest is probably around 10 or 11 now, and the eldest is about 17, 18. He's a couple years older than my son. And their adventures and how they travel across the world. So super cool. So check this out if you're someone who does want. Has ever thought about traveling with your children, or you're looking for like an interesting way to vacation other than just going to an all-inclusive resort, which is lovely. But imagine we were talking earlier about a vacation that a girlfriend is taking that's costing a whole heck of a lot of money. And I'm like, if I took that money and put it elsewhere, how much more could I do? So it's just a different way of traveling. So
correct.
Very, very, very cool. So Fiona I do want to give her a bit of a shout out, because she does actually work with a travel agency now called Family Adventures Await, and it's a boutique travel agency that basically specializes in their love of exploring the world with their children. So
that's a cool idea.
We'll post some details on that.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what the show notes are or don't know how to scroll down, either video or audio, you'll have the link. But if you're just listening to this, it's always stephaniepichet.ca/flavor2, because season 2 dash episode number. And we are at episode number 27 today. So that's flavor 2-27.
Can I do my WTAF now?
Yeah, you can do your WTAF.
Okay.
And here we go with the E rating.
Right.
Yeah, I have to give you. You know what?
haven't said it yet.
I was editing last week. It was a kids episode. I'm thinking, okay, what if there's kids watching it? And I'm scrolling through it, and I'm thinking, okay, let's see if she's not going to swear.
I didn't say
She's not
fuck
gonna
at
swear.
all, did I?
There was one part where I couldn't tell if you did. So it was like if you said like friggin' or fucking, or I wasn't quite sure. So I thought should I put the E rating on? So I think I put it on the audio one, but I was laughing because I think he said shit, and I thought I'll let that go.
Shit's all right. Yeah, you can say
Shit's all
shit
right.
on network television now. So I think really the F-bomb is the only one that I use that is considered explicit.
Okay.
Honestly, it was my son's first swear, so no judgment. Okay, so because I'm on the topic of kids, I had to share this one. I haven't even read the whole article yet. I just saw the headline. I thought, okay, we need to experience this together because we're friends now. Okay. So, Heinz has now put out a new series of mayonnaise mashups because it's really, really hard to put mayonnaise and other spreads on your sandwich at the same time. I know, America, it's tough. I get it. So you can now buy mayo chup. What is that?
Which is mayonnaise and ketchup, I'm guessing.
Mayo must.
Oh, that's an awful name.
Actually sounds like something that lives in someone's underwear after a while.
As opposed to mayo turd.
Yeah! And I don't think either one of them is any good.
I'm sure there was probably like a marketing meeting, like how are we going to name this? And someone
Mayo
said
tart.
mayo tart.
So many things wrong with that name. So that would be mustard. And then the third one took me a minute. I don't know why, but mayo cube.
It's mayonnaise and barbecue.
So
That one, at least it sounds better, but I like mayo tart.
mayo tart. It's mayo must, by the way.
That's
Which
gonna be a
actually
little
just
hectic.
sounds really dirty and gross. So where it kind of comes from is a traditional kind of mayonnaise mix-up, which is mayonnaise and garlic, which makes an aioli. And in traveling overseas, I found that specifically in the UK and in Australia, you get a lot of aioli with your fries. So it's basically, again, mayonnaise and garlic. So I guess, America decided that they needed more things mixed up together because you can't possibly do them separately. So you can find in stores now a specific blend. It's supposed to be just the right ratio of mayonnaise to barbecue and mayonnaise to mustard and mayonnaise to ketchup. So when you get a message, does it stop you recording?
Nope.
You're good? Okay, cool. Okay. So if you're in the States and you're looking for something interesting to try out mayo tart, mayo must, mayo Q, and
Mayo must is so much
was
better.
it mayo chup? Is that what I said it was? Yeah, and mayo chup. And let us know because we can't get it here and I'm not really feeling like I'm missing out on anything, but if we're missing out on something, let us know.
Mayo tart. Yeah, post
Mayo tart.
pictures.
It's not mayo tart.
I'm
Hashtag mayo tart.
I'm calling it mayo tart.
Oh wait, I gotta make a note of our hashtag. Hashtag.
iPad, just gonna make a note of it. Okay. So now that we had that fun, I can't get that
Okay,
on my head.
now
Now we're gonna get some
Aunt's
serious
Steph's gonna
business.
get serious.
Serious about talking about drinking wine. Okay, so we're not going to be that serious. It is about wine after all. Here's a good example. As you can see behind me, for those of you who are watching the video, it is late afternoon, looking at that 4 o'clock-ish time. It's around that time of day, especially at the end of a work week, like on a Friday, where all of a sudden you're going, okay, you know what? I'm tapped out, work's done. I want to sit down, relax, wind down a bit before I get dinner started. Or you're on holidays and it's not quite dinner time yet, or you're at someplace tropical and you want to sort of treat yourself to an extra glass before dinner. There's usually a set of rules that I kind of make for myself that have worked for me because of the fact that I do sample wines quite a bit and I'm traveling quite a bit. And if I had to drink all of the wines that were poured for me when it was poured, at certain times of the day, as often as I do, I would not be functioning very well. So these are kind of my little rules. A couple of them, they stem from just classic traditions, especially over in Europe. So I'll give you an example. In France, you rarely ever see any local French people drinking wine without food. So they'll have wine at lunch, they'll have wine at dinner. Sometimes, occasionally, especially on weekends, they may treat themselves to a glass of champagne or some kind of a champagne cocktail or mimosa, something like that. But usually like a glass of champagne on its own with not all the bells and whistles can be enjoyed for breakfast. I love when you call it a breakfast wine. So now when you hear someone saying breakfast wine, you know what they're talking about. Basically something that's light and dry, not too high in alcohol, just something that's kind of giving that acid balance to whatever rich dish you're having for breakfast. So when I say drinking with the sun, what I'm talking about is the color of the sky. So, you know, early in the day, it's very bright, it's very light, so light wine. Later in the afternoon, especially around dusk, things start to get a little pink in color. That's when I tend to gravitate towards rosé. And I'll explain all three in a second. And then as soon as the evening comes and it's dinner time, that's when I'll start to go into the reds. I don't mind having a red at lunch earlier during the day, but it needs to be a very light red for me, and only if I know that I have a very easy day and I won't be drinking much for the rest of the day. So that's basically my little set rules. Now, here's some examples. So let's pretend that I'm having a long day, long day of drinking. So let's pretend that, okay, I've got a lunch meeting that I'm going to, and I know it's a bunch of ladies that are all going to want wine. Then maybe I have a late afternoon podcast taping, which happens more often than you think, at around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then let's just say after the taping is finished, we have an evening event, or I have an evening event that I have to get to. So in my head, when I get up in the morning, I know, oh my goodness, I'm going to have a lot of wine today. I need to pace myself. And the way that I do that has to do with this drinking system. So at lunch, I'm going to have white. That's just going to be my go-to. If I'm ordering anything to eat for lunch, it is going to be something that goes well with the white wine. So I'm in that case, because I want something that's light and lower alcohol content, I want to make sure that I'm ordering something that's going to go with that wine. So a lot of times I will actually look at the wine list first, choose my wine, and then I'll go through the menu to find something that'll go with that. But this way I can have a glass of wine with the rest of the people sitting at the table, but I don't have to overindulge because I know that there's more coming the rest of the day. So for some lower alcohol options, something light like a Prosecco never goes wrong. You can actually have like a Prosecco or other sparkling dry wine pretty much any time of the day. I think it's the one exception to my rule, except for the fact it's having one glass, right, people? Not 2, 3. Something that's similar, less alcohol and usually drier is a Vinho Verde, which is a Portuguese called green wine. So that's what Vinho Verde translates to in Portuguese. And it is very dry, lower in alcohol content, and surprisingly very inexpensive. So even when you're out at restaurants, you'll find that's probably one of the cheapest wines by the glass. It is a great option for lunch, especially if you're going to have anything like seafood or something like a salad, and it's got a lot of acid that can balance it out. It's just, it's a really lovely wine. I think you should go and take a look for them. Actually, I'm going to put one in the show notes for you. I'll give you one to go and try. It's very refreshing. I know a lot of people who like a little bit of sparkling, but don't like the amount of carbonation in most sparkling wines, really tend to enjoy the Vinho Verde because it is still very dry, but it's just got more of a spritz than it actually has a full bubble. So white wine, lower content. Some Rieslings are lower in content, would be a good option. If you like something that's a little bit on the sweeter side, sweeter doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be higher in alcohol content, but again, just be careful if you're not used to all of that sugar. But then I would go into maybe a Moscato or something like that, but something light and easy. Another option, if you were stuck on red and you are not a white fan, or if you have a sweet tooth and you happen to really like sweeter wines, I would say gamble, and especially if you're at an Italian place, try a Lambrusco. So Lambrusco is an Italian grape that is usually served chilled. So it's not something that it looks very dark and heavy, but it's very light, very refreshing, and lower in alcohol content. So it's one of the ones, believe it or not, that I sometimes even serve with desserts when I'm having dinner at the house. So it's actually been one of the ones that usually gets featured in my sparkling wine class, and it's one of the favorites usually by the end of the night, because many people have never tried a sparkling red, and they're always so surprised at how, after everything else they've consumed that night, how still light and refreshing it can be. So go for Lambrusco. Now we're going, so I've had my lunch meeting. Now I'm having my late afternoon podcast taping. So you may have noticed that I had some wine in front of me earlier when we taped this episode, but I did start with a rosé. And it's partly because, again, during that time of day, I wanted something still cool and refreshing because I'm thirsty probably by then. I don't want to get into the heavy reds right away because we were taping an extra episode later after this. So I want to make sure that I'm pacing myself properly. So rosé is actually made from red grapes most of the time, or a combination of red and white grapes. But the red grapes, the skin contact during the winemaking process is what gives it this beautiful color. So there's all different styles of rosés that are out there. I think we're going to do an entire rosé episode at some point later in the spring. But essentially, there's different sugar levels, different alcohol levels, different strengths and flavors, different acidity levels. And a lot of times it has such a wide range of colors that I'm going to guess within the next few weeks or so, you're usually going to start to see all of your wine stores or liquor stores start to make displays of all the rosé wines. And you'll get to see all of the colors from a very pale salmon color all the way to a juicy strawberry looking one. So basically take and pick what you want, but it's kind of like a red wine gateway, if that makes any sense. So I still like it. It's like it's not quite a white wine. It's sort of prepping me for the red wines later. And I actually love rosés with just about any appetizers. So this is your happy hour go-to. This is your, you're going to have deep fried snacks or a cheese board or something. The rosé pretty much goes with anything as long as it's not overly sweet. So I would go for a rosé for that. So now sun's going down, of course, dinner's starting. I just finished taping the podcast episode. Now I have to go and meet some other people for an event later that night. Now I can have a red. However, if I'm going to be only there for an hour or so, I'm going to choose the best red wine if that's my finale, and I'm going to enjoy it. If I know I'm going to have 2 or 3 hours and there's a full evening ahead, I will actually start off with a lighter red. I like a dry Pinot Noir as an example. I happen to like a Gamay, something that's going to be a little light, kind of like a Beaujolais would be a nice start. And then I'll sort of work into something heavy. So here at the house, what I just poured for the fridge, for those of you who are watching on video, this first one is a Semillon. It's about 11%. That's the white wine. The rosé is the Côte de Rose, which is a French Provençal style rosé. It's also at about 13% alcohol, so it's a little bit heavier than the white, but it's not going to have as many of the tannins and seeds, and I'll explain that in a second. And then the red that I'm having is one of my husband's favorites. That's why it's already open. It is the Baron de la Gran Reserva Rioja, and it's you can't get this one anymore, but that's before he went out of town, he decided to open it. So I can't put the link on this because you can't get it. Sorry, folks. But something heavier like a red or whatever is a great way to sort of end an evening. Now, when I talked about skin and seed contacts, this has to do with what wine does for you. And as you probably know, wine is a natural depressant. It makes you sleepy, and it's partly for 2 reasons. One, the seeds and these skins actually help produce a little bit of melatonin, which is what kind of makes you sleepy and drowsy. And it is said, and I don't think it's been proven yet, but it is said that the fermentation process will actually accentuate that. So white wines, barely any skin and seed contact whatsoever, so less natural melatonin produced. Rosé, of course, is going to have a little bit more, and then, of course, your red wines, the darker it is, the more seed and skin contact, the more natural melatonin will be produced. So that's why when you're drinking red wine, you get sleepy and get a little sloppy, especially if you want to have more than 1 glass. So now, does this all make sense? So that's why I'm starting with the white wine, because it is low in melatonin, and it is lower in alcohol, lower in sugar. it's just an easier way to start your afternoon of imbibing. Later in the afternoon, I can move into something a little bit heavier. So it's a little higher in alcohol content, this rosé. However, again, very light skin and seat contact, which means slightly less melatonin. Don't go crazy. It's still technically a little bit higher in alcohol, but you just have to realize that you will feel the alcohol hitting you, not necessarily just as sleepy. Okay. And the last one is the red wine. Now, the heavier the red wine, the higher the alcohol content, and then the higher the alcohol, the higher the sugar, and the higher the melatonin. That's your triple whammy. That's what's basically going to put you out for the evening. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of people like to treat themselves to a really good glass of a big red wine before they go to bed. That one glass is the magic number. Having a one glass will actually help you sleep better. But now I'm going to talk to the ladies out there. So has been proven, sorry to say, anything more than one glass of red wine before you go to bed, it is going to disturb your sleep. Now, I happen to be of a certain age where my hormones are already going hairy-carry all over the place. So for me to add on red wine or too much red wine before I go to bed, I'm asking for trouble. It's called a disturbed sleep. So, when you're getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning, you may have crashed easily after those couple glasses of red wine when you were watching Netflix. But at 2 or 3 in the morning, doesn't matter if your partner or husband is snoring happily beside you, you are wide awake and you may have trouble getting back to sleep. All that melatonin has worn off. The sugar that basically caused your blood sugar to rise has now crashed. It's basically a recipe for disaster, especially if you're trying to get a good night's sleep. So kind of keep that in mind. That is one of the reasons that your sleep gets disrupted, has to do with the amount of wine, especially the red wines that you're having at the end of the night. So I didn't mean it to be so serious, but I wanted to make sure that you all understood it. And so this way that you can drink safely and you can enjoy yourself for the entire day. Okay, so in closing, there are a lot of wines that are available that have different alcohol levels, and all you have to do is read the labels, just like you would when you're buying food. It's not that really, it's not a difficult step, but if you're going to plan and entertain for a long period of time and you want to make sure your guests don't get too sloppy too soon, just make sure that you're kind of pulling out a wine or something as you progress throughout the evening. But all of that, there's also kind of fun things that are happening on the VIP lounge just to get you ready for spring. So as an example, I just finished doing, besides giving away stuff, I'm going away in about a week or so from now, and I'll be bringing back little goodies from where I am for one of the lucky winners in the VIP lounge. And you're also going to see little recipes and stuff. I'll do them live from my kitchen, but then you can watch the videos later, but you have to be in the VIP lounge. And how do we get in the VIP lounge?
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
You have to go to FFFVIP, and that'll pull us up. It'll ask you for the code word, or the special entry word, which is spring.
Because we're tired of winter.
We're dreaming of winter. The snow is like here and over. So, she's escaping to Brazil. Don't worry, folks. I'll still be here in the snow for you. So someone has to experience it for you.
Anyway, so once you've entered, it doesn't matter. You can automatically you're there. You don't have to keep entering after that. Once you're part of a membership, you're ready to go. And then you'll get contests. You'll get the leads on any other events and stuff we've got coming up, where our live shows are going to be. If there's ticketed events, and when we're traveling, if you want to come join us, all that kind of fun stuff. We always put out the invites to the VIPs first.
Yeah,
just to make it easy. Okay, so in the meantime. If you want to follow my little system, just so that you can enjoy your wine and not get loopy, I think that was my official term, loopy. But as long as you're drinking, that's fine with me.
Cheers.
Cheers.